Hey guys. Alright, so we've pretty much finished up the animal systems and the body systems that were, the ones that I told you we would focus on. And now we are on to metabolism. So metabolism is all about how your body goes through all of those reactions that it needs to do to supply you with the energy you need for every single process that takes place on a day-to-day basis. So we're talking respiration and photosynthesis, really. That's the big pictures when it comes to AP biology and it comes to metabolism. The whole point is either the production or the usage of ATP. So before we even start with respiration or photosynthesis, we're going to start with ATP. This is going to be fairly quick, hopefully painless, so let's go. Okay, so life runs on energy, and living organisms are what we call endergonic systems. Hopefully you remember from chemistry that endergonic means kind of within. It's all about absorbing energy to do the work that you need to do. Okay, so you're taking energy from someplace and absorbing it, making a bond, creating a stored version of that energy. And that's pretty much what we do all day long for as long as we live. It's kind of bad to equate your entire life to just storing and using energy, but ultimately that's what your body's doing. So why do we need all of this energy? Well, your body is constantly going to be building molecules and sometimes breaking them apart as well. We are reproducing, we are constantly moving, there is active transport taking place in our cells, all of which require energy. And then we have that whole temperature regulation thing, because we can't get too hot or we can't get too cold, because we tend to be warm-blooded and we have control over our internal temperature. But it doesn't run on air and hopes and dreams, it runs on energy. Now, when you're talking about a living thing, energy is going to be in the form of ATP. So obviously we need lots of energy to live. Where's this energy coming from? Well, it comes from what we call energy coupling. Coupling suggests that we're going to be merging or putting two things together. In biology, the terms we use are the terms catabolic and anabolic. But if we were to think from a chemist's perspective, we would use the terms exergonic and endergonic. So pretty much storing and making bonds, or breaking bonds and utilizing the energy released. That's pretty much what those two sets of reactions do. So catabolic reactions, which are exergonic, are all about release of energy and using that energy to do whatever the work is required. Whereas anabolic reactions are endergonic reactions, which are all about putting things together, making new things, and storing that energy. So if you look at this little diagram, an example of a catabolic reaction could be digestion, like when you digest your food. So you have a big molecule, you split it up into smaller molecules, you release some energy there. You've broken it down, but you've released energy. So that's why energy is one of our products. Now, let's say you need to now build like some muscle tissue or some a specific protein or something. That is going to require energy. So the energy you just freed up, you're going to take that same energy and use it in a synthesis reaction, which would be an example of an anabolic reaction. So we're taking two small monomers. With the energy, we're going to create a bond between these monomers and make a different molecule. All right, so digestion is catabolic. It's all about the release of energy, whereas synthesis is anabolic. It's all about using said energy to make a new substance. So, where are we going to get the energy from? I mean, we know we need it. We know how we get it. We get it through those two reactions, but where does it come from? Well, all that food that you eat, it's not just because it tastes good. You're eating it, and if you're eating the right things, hopefully what you're getting out of your food would be high energy organic molecules. So, aka carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Once they're in your system will digest them. Remember, that's going to be an example of catabolism, releasing the energy that those foods, those molecules have naturally, and capturing that released energy in a form that your cell can use to do the job that the cell is used for, whatever is required. So now we know where the energy comes from, but how do we move it around? Is it changing form? How is this working? Well, from freshman year, you were taught that when we talk about cellular energy, we are talking about ATP. So we consider ATP to be the energy currency of your body, of all living things. It's a way to pass energy around because technically energy isn't a physical thing. You can't like pick energy up and give it to the person next to you. All right. So what ATP allows us to do is it allows us to store that energy that we've released, and then we can utilize it whenever we need to, because this is what we call short-term storage. It doesn't hold it for a long amount of time. It's easy to break off whatever you need and release the amount of energy needed to do a job. Okay, so what is ATP? ATP is a modified nucleotide. It looks just like the same nucleotides or similar to the nucleotides that make up DNA. It stands for adenosine triphosphate, so ATP. Adenosine is a modified nitrogen base. It comes from the nitrogen base adenine. We've added a couple of things to make it adenosine. Now, on a normal nucleotide, there would only be one phosphate group. The adding of this phosphate is an endergonic reaction because we're making something, we're synthesizing something. But in the name, it's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So tri suggests that we're going to have 3 of these phosphate molecules instead of 1. Every time you add a phosphate molecule in, those phosphates are being held together by high energy bonds. So that's where the energy is being stored that your cell can later use. So how does ATP store energy? Well, ATP, the biggest part of ATP would be these phosphate groups, of which it can hold up to 3. Phosphate, as I've told you several times, is highly electronegative. All those oxygens make it a negative compound. Now, because they're negative, and if you remember how electrons work very similarly to magnets, what do like forces do? They tend to repel each other. Okay, so negative is going to be pushing these negatives, will be pushing on these negatives, creating what we call an unstable bond. So there's a lot of energy between this phosphate and that phosphate, but it's hard to keep it bonded to the molecule because you have these repelling forces taking place. So because it's so unstable, the term we use to describe that is called spring-loaded. It means that at any moment, this phosphate, under the right conditions, can be broken off, releasing the amount of energy in that bond between this phosphate group and that phosphate group. Ironically enough, most energy is stored in this third phosphate. They all are fairly high energy storing, but it's the bond between phosphate 2 and phosphate 3 that contains the most energy. Again, that third phosphate is the one that's the hardest to keep bonded to ATP. This is the one that's really unstable. So under the right conditions, it would be very simple to break that bond, move that phosphate out, and release the energy stored in that bond. It's this process and it's this ability that makes ATP the perfect energy currency. Okay, so how does the energy get transferred? We know where it's held. We know it's an unstable bond, but how is it released? Well, when you break that bond between phosphate 2 and phosphate 3, you take ATP and make it into ADP. The D stands for di, so adenosine diphosphate, suggesting that we only have 2 phosphates. That action releases 7.3 kilocalories per mole of energy. Calories is how we measure energy. Now, it's going to be negative because this can be fairly spontaneous. This reaction can take place without a whole lot of help, so hence the negative sign. So whenever that bond gets broken, that's how much energy is released. 7.3 kilocalories per mole. It's this energy that we use to fuel whatever other reactions need to take place. This action is called phosphorylation. You should hopefully remember us talking about that when we talked about cell communication. We talked about adding a phosphate and losing a phosphate as a way that a signal propagates. So it's kind of the same concept here. Every time that phosphate group is broken off, you're transferring energy to other molecules. Okay, you're releasing that energy so that you can now use it for whatever other purpose you have. So pretty much phosphorylation is just the breaking off of a phosphate group and putting that phosphate group someplace else. But here's what you have to remember. Anywhere that you're going to put this group, it's going to be fairly unstable because it's so highly negative. Now, the enzymes that do phosphorylation, the enzymes that are in charge of moving and breaking these bonds, are called kinases. They're cutting enzymes. Okay, so this it's a messy picture because it's supposed to be an animation, so I apologize for that. But this just kind of goes through how we build polymers from monomers. But the great thing is, you already know this because this is just like dehydration synthesis, like when we talked about carbs and when we talked about lipids and when we talked about proteins. It's the same process. Except this time, we're looking at where the energy is coming in to actually make these molecules connect and pull that water off. So that's all that's taking place here. So why is this important? Well, the concept of phosphorylation is important for you to understand because it's the first series of steps in cellular respiration. Now, cellular respiration isn't breathing in and out like you do with your lungs. The oxygen you take in has a part to play, but it's not actual breathing. Cellular respiration is how your body is able to break down glucose and from that glucose produce the ATP needed to run all of the various reactions that have to take place within you all the time. Okay, so this whole thing works as a cycle. We're forever cycling between ATP and ADP. And yes, sometimes we form AMP as well, but not as often. We're literally constantly going from ATP to ADP when we lose a phosphate, from ADP to ATP when we gain a phosphate. So we're always releasing 7.3 kilocalories or absorbing 7.3 kilocalories. It's because ATP is so unstable you can't store it. There's no like little ATP vault in your cell. It's just constantly cycling. It's always changing. Think of it kind of like when you have change in your pocket. At some point in time, you may have $1 or even $2, but you're always utilizing that change. It's $1.25 for a water at school. So there goes 25 cents. And then you might use a $5 bill and get back some more change, and now you have that 25 cents back again. So it's always a constant thing. That change is always rotating out of your pocket, rotating out and rotating in, just like these phosphate groups are constantly rotating onto ATP and off of ADP. So ATP is a really good energy donor. Part of that reason is because you can't store it for a very long time. It's very easy to react. It transfers phosphates really easy. It's only a short-term energy store, which is why in our bodies we store energy long-term in the form of really fats and then sometimes carbohydrates. And it's because it's so unstable. Again, don't forget, it is unstable because of all of those oxygens, okay? Little side note, which I think highly interesting. A working muscle recycles over 10 million ATPs per second. So when you are playing soccer, when you're walking quickly to your car because you're late for class, you're utilizing tons of ATP. And for all of you who don't know, This guy right here is Kirani James. He is Grenada's only gold medal ever in the Olympics. It's in the 400. I suggest you look him up because he's pretty awesome. Okay, moving on. So, your cell's going to spend tons of time making ATP. It needs it. It can't function without it. Your body can't function without it. So, you're going to see this a lot as I go through both photosynthesis and respiration. It's kind of the mantra of the metabolic chapter. The whole point of doing all of the reactions that you're going to have to learn eventually is to make ATP, because without it, your body can't do anything. Okay, this guy, who looks really, really weird, I know, is an enzyme. This enzyme is called ATP synthase. So like the name suggests, it is the enzyme that actually creates ATP. It is the enzyme that's in charge of adding that extra phosphate onto ADP, making it ATP. We will go through this in great detail when we talk about respiration. All right, so that's it for ATP. You're gonna get really comfortable and really familiar with the mitochondria really soon, because that's what we're spending the next 6 days or so on. It's all about cellular respiration. So, see you soon. Bye, guys.